start this book review, I do want to warn everyone who is watching this that this book has a lot of very upsetting triggers. A lot of triggers having to do with suicide and death and mental illnesses and depression, bipolar, things of that nature. So if you are very sensitive to those kinds of triggers, please do not watch this video and please go watch something else of mine or somebody else's because I do not want to upset you guys. However, this is a book that deals with a lot of things that are very triggering to a lot of people who have dealt with things like suicide and depression and things of that nature. Theodore Finch and Violet Markey come from two different walks of life. Theodore Finch has always been fascinated with the concept of death, and every time he gets closer and closer to it, he becomes more and more adrenalized, and there doesn't seem to be any stopping from him. Violet Markey, on the other hand, is counting the days until she's able to graduate from her small-town high school in Indiana. And after the passing of her older sister, things start to get really tough for her as she starts to wonder if it's even possible for her to make it to graduation and continue to live her life without her big sister. These two meet in the most unlikely of places, at the top of the bell tower at their small Indiana school, where both of them are thinking of jumping. And the story that follows is a wonderful friendship that has blossomed between these two because they both balance each other in different ways that is unimaginable to the other. In Jennifer Niven's story, All the Bright Places, we follow the friendship of Theodore and Violet as it blossoms and grows into something that is completely beautiful and all the things that transpire from there. This novel, oh my god, you guys, this was such a great story. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me ugly cry of all things, which that doesn't normally happen with YA contemporary novels as like this. Most of the time I get a little bit of feels for some of the characters and then I kind of go on my way, it's nothing major. This novel though, I had so many feels for Theodore and from Violet and their relationship and friendship as it blossomed because there were so many things that I could pick out about Theodore that I recognized in a lot of my friends growing up and in people that I love, and I really attributed to Violet Markey a lot because if I was to have an older sister, I think I would have gone through the same thing that she did in the story because, for one, I have a lot of things in common with her. She is a writer in the story and I am a writer as well, and so things like that I'm able to connect with her on, and a lot of the things that she talks about in terms of how she's processed this grief that she has for her older sister's death, a lot of it was very similar to how I have felt when I've lost somebody very close to me. I lost my grandfather when I was 13, and it was really hard for me to be able to move past it. For several years, it was very hard, and even at 20 years old now, it's still, from day to day, it's a hard thing for me to accept the fact that he's gone because he was such a big part of my life, just like Violet's older sister Eleanor was for her. So throughout this story, there's a lot of times where I was able to really connect with these characters for one reason or another, which made me get really feelsy for them. And then at the end of it, I'm ugly crying and I'm just so sad, but I'm really happy with how the story ended because I felt that it ended on a fairly positive note, despite some things that did happen that caused it to be much more negative. I really thought that this novel was an interesting look into the ideas of grief and loss and depression and suicidal tendencies. It was such an interesting story to look at because we don't get many novels that are like this. In society today, we face suicide as almost like a bad thing, which it is in one aspect because you're actually losing someone. Somebody is actually taking their life out of society because they don't feel they fit in. But I don't believe that it's being as focused on as much as it should because we focus more on the fact that the person is selfish and that they had more to live for. We don't really attribute the mental health aspect to that, and that is what I think is lacking in society. We are not looking at the mental health aspect of suicide and why it is that people commit suicide in the first place. And it's something that I think that books like All the Bright Places and Impulse and It's Kind of a Funny Story play into that. Despite the fact that it was super sad most of the story, it was really funny in a lot of parts because the main characters were really able to bounce off of each other very well. Despite the fact that they were so different, I think that it kind of worked because it gave us a good blending of two different personalities that wouldn't seem to work at first, but kind of did. I felt that Violet and Finch's relationship was very, very strained, not only because of the way that it started, but because of the differences between them. But I thought that the strain was actually really interesting because I don't think that that is played into very often, the strains of certain relationships from people who are completely different. Most of the time when you have characters who are two completely different people that end up being together, the author just makes it that so that they're completely perfect, and that's not necessarily what happens. So I'm glad that in Jennifer Niven's novel, she did show that there was quite a strain between Violet and Finch because they were very different people, and it was expressed throughout many parts of the novel. Another thing I really did enjoy about this novel was really the character progression throughout this novel, for Violet especially. Violet was very, very timid in a lot of things. She was very scared to do a lot of things because of after what happened to her sister. In the very beginning of the story, she talks about how she has this what's called extenuating circumstances, where everything she's done for school has extenuating circumstances to where she can't exactly complete everything. But then towards the end of the novel, you start seeing that she's actually able to complete things. She's actually starting back up with some new things that she used to do in the past that she can't really do anymore. And that's because of the relationship she built with Finch. He helped to build her up in a way, but not to the point where she couldn't stand on her own. It was still really good to see that there was a lot of good character progression, a lot of not quick progression either. It was very slow progression, as I think would be normal of a person who is dealing with grief and loss and things of that nature. So overall, my thoughts of All the Bright Places were that I thought it was a fantastic, fantastic book. It is definitely something I would recommend to someone who is maybe struggling with suicidal tendencies or is struggling with mental health issues, because at least with this novel, even though it's very, very sad, there's a lot of things that I think that they can relate to that can maybe help them with trying to heal themselves, because I feel like people who have mental health problems and have suicidal tendencies, they feel that they are so alone and that nobody really understands them, when in actuality, this book has a lot of things that I think that they could really take away from and understand that they're not exactly alone and there are other people like them. One other thing I did want to mention, though, about this is the fact that Jennifer Niven herself actually wrote this novel after the passing of a friend from suicide. And so I would consider this to be a bit of an own voices novel in a way, because although she wasn't the one that actually committed suicide, she was greatly affected by suicide in her life because of somebody that she knew that had committed suicide. I just really thought Jennifer Niven did a great job with this, because her own pain that she suffered from dealing with a friend that had committed suicide is well expressed in this novel, because everything seems so real. There was not one instance in this entire novel that I felt that anything was too forced or too much. I thought that everything was just as perfect as it needed to be, and like I said, I cried so many times in this novel, but it was such a good book. It's a really good novel to get yourself involved in the idea of trying to help somebody who may be suffering from something that is almost completely blind to everyone else. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this book review of All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, I'm sorry for all the triggers that may have been mentioned in this, but unfortunately this is a novel where these triggers are displayed for everyone to see, and I won't lie, when I got towards the end of this, about 3/4 of the way through it, I had to stop for a little bit just because I was so overwrought with emotion, because I myself have dealt with many a friend who has wanted to commit suicide, and it has not been an easy task for me to try to handle that, because even though I'm an outsider and I have not myself wanted to commit suicide, being the person that is still having to witness somebody going through that is still painful in itself. And so I wanted to make it known that I understand this novel completely, because I've been in the position of someone who has wanted to try to help somebody from committing suicide. So if you really want to be more involved with trying to help people with mental illnesses and things like that, this is a really good novel to get into, because it really does explain a lot of the thoughts and processes that people with mental illnesses and suicidal tendencies go through. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!